Okay. Thank you all very much for coming along to this launch for Webster's latest strange little stories. But um, I'm very excited to be here and to share this time and space with you. So we'll be hearing excerpts from the book from Webster later, and then a conversation between Em and Fran. It's like a really interesting series of questions and answers about the notion of hope and how we fantastic. Jenny's joined us. Um, and basically how we achieve that in such interesting times, I guess. And Webster's asked me to give you a few words of my own in the meantime. If you have any questions, get into the chat. Yes. Let us know if you need anything. If you've got any technical questions, probably best to ask me. And I will do my best to help and support. But we're all just terribly pleased to see you here. What I'll be doing is I'll be spotlighting each of us as we perform. So I'll do that now for me so that the rest of you do not feel uh, overly exposed, overly perceived. So yes, I am now going to tell you a story. And I come from a family of raconteurs, I guess you'd say. People who can't just give you a fact, they have to give you the background and then the background to that. And that kind of always leads you to the question of where does any story start? Begin at the beginning, but what does that mean? What is the first impulse for any tale to take its shape? And this particular story that I want to tell you is all about names and places and, yes, a little hope in the mix, as well as the notion of fixed fate or not. And where do we start? Who is the main character after all? That's always the big question for any storyteller. Who's the person who carries this story? And I've got to say, in this one, I feel it's a bit like a team effort. So first of all, I'm going to tell you about someone called Baba Yaga. And you may have heard of her. For some people, she's a witch. For others, a demon. But before all of these things happened, she was a spirit of the forest. And before that, she was a goddess. It's possible that as the forests shrunk, so did she. As roads started to be built, as the margins became less marginal, better defined. Thank you so much for raising my hand. Zoom. Glorious stuff. Don't know how to take that off. It's a good look. I think it's just going to sit there unless Webster can work out how to take my hand off. Um, anyway, I'm a gesticulator. It's part of the raconteurishness. Um, This is like when I told the story in a former torture chamber dungeon place in Edinburgh, and my alarm went off to tell me that I needed to make sure I got up in time to go for my usual date with my partner, who was sitting at the back anyway. It was a little distracting, but it's fine. The technology's been dealt with. As the forests shrank, so did she. And what not a lot of people know is that Baba Yaga merely means old woman. That's it. That's all. That's all her name means. She's become a symbol of age and gender alone. And you can meet on any journey more than just one of her. Sometimes they have command of the skies and the form of the many birds that flock about her, or the lands in the terms of the many horses, or the seas in terms of the fish and other creatures of the water that come to her bidding. And in all of them, a fire long banked but still present that speaks of greatness, of what she was before. And Baba Yaga is a catalyst, you might say. She's someone you meet on your way from here to there, from safety to adventure, from dullness to excitement, from stultification to fate. Because in the place where she became, in the depths of the forest, in that place where no man can truly tame, it's the place you go to make a change in the legends of those people, where you go from youth to experience, lost to reunited, quick to dead. If you can get the ravens to help you from dead to quick again, it's important to know who your real friends are. And in amongst all this, hunched like a spider, in the middle of her glorious web sits Baba Yaga, with her witch-wild hair and iron tooth, which someone told me she once used to eat through a mountain. I'd love to know more of that story, but that's a side quest. Let's get back to the main track. That's where you go to ask her advice. And if you know the right words to say, you can speak out to the little cottage she dwells in, propped on enormous chicken's feet. If you say the right words, it'll compel it to turn, bend its scaly knees, open its doors, and let you in. Like I say, knowing the right words to say is important. And when you get in, best not be too demanding. Because, after all, it's not the way of a good guest to just come in, threaten, and not really know what you've got yourself in for, because the next thing you know is you won't end up on the way to the mountaintop. You'll be stuck in her cellar forever, or for the next time Baba Yaga needs a snack. Good manners. Very, very important. So she's waiting, Baba Yaga, for the next thing to change, the next person to shift. And lo and behold, yes, outside. It's been a long night. She's been studying, and each new thing she revisits in her books leads to another thought and another and another. And I don't know if you've ever stayed up all night just bouncing from thought to thought and other people's thoughts to thoughts as the candles dwindle and the light rises outside. And just as she was thinking, maybe I can just go to sleep, it's not like, anyone's going to tell me off, was a knock on the door and a clear young voice calling out from outside, little house, turn round to me, let the sun on your windows, the whole world to see." So, of course, the house, being well trained, does that thing. Everything tilts, and nobody ever considers what it's like to be inside the house as it's tilting and rocking, what that does to the ornaments, what that does to your peace of mind, your sense of balance, the fact that you have to just sit and wait for it to finish happening. And you've probably arranged all of your shelves to have edges so that nothing falls over this time, maybe. Stuff slides, the book goes on the floor. Good job the candles have gone out, huh? And then they come. Young, bold, strong, beautiful, great. What do you want? Well, actually, says the young person, beautifully arrayed, sword on the hip, all of that kind of thing, sits down at the table opposite Baba Yaga and says, "Oddly enough, I was going to ask you the same thing." What? Nobody ever asks me that. Are you sure you're in the right place? Yes. And I was taught that you don't ask for something for nothing. So what can I do to help? Bring in some water, chop some logs? You're all right, she says. What do you need? Come on, just tell me what your quest is and we'll work it out from there. He says, well, and they proceed to tell the tale of two older siblings lost on the route to somewhere. Big ambitions. Track the dragon, kill it, hunt it down, make a name for themselves. And she's thinking, oh yeah, that one, up the mountain just over there. I know exactly. Wait. She says, yes, you can absolutely do me a favor if you survive all of this. I'll give you what you need to get up there. But when you get up there, you're going to get frozen and you're going to get boiled, and I'll give you the things that you need to sort that out. The warming hood, a cooling drink, all of that kind of thing. I even give you a pin cushion that will skip ahead of you all the way to where you need to go, and you'll find your siblings under the snow, but you can't do anything for them yet. You need to defeat things. There's things to defeat. I'm sure you've got this. But on your way to doing that, you can drink from the well of strength, and that'll sort you out for the fighting bit. And then there's the well of life, and you can use that to revive your siblings. But you won't have any need of the third well. That's for me, the well of youth. Bring me back a bucket of water from the well of youth, and we'll call it even. He says, water of youth. It's a bit shallow, isn't it? Listen, kid, my bones don't do what they once did. They creak and they bend in the wrong places. Everything that's supposed to be tight is now loose. Everything that's supposed to be loose is now tight. Everything that's supposed to be full is now sparse, and everything hurts. Imagine that if you can. And imagine that maybe some miracle could occur and I could have all of this wisdom in a body that, bounces a bit. That's all I want. A return to what I had when I didn't know what it meant. Okay? Before mankind encroached and robbed me of all of that. That's all I want. A return. A refund. And if you survive, do you fancy doing that? Sure. They say, yep, that sounds great. Sorry, anyway, thanks for the pincushion and the things. And off they go, hopefully having learned something already. And so she waits in the cottage. And the cottage settles down after a while because it knows it's got to have a while to wait. And together they sigh, check the weather, see how there's a sudden gust of wind and snow on the mountaintop, and oh, yep, there's a blast of heat thing. If you listen very, very carefully, you can hear the clash of arms and some roaring and all of the other things that you consider in a good hero versus monster story. But that's all in the distance. It's for someone else to consider. Baba Yaga and the house are just waiting. But for once, they've got stakes in this. Dawn rises, like it seems to do so often, and down. Someone is coming down the mountain. Some ones are coming down the mountain. And at their footsteps? No. Yes. Oh. The hero and their siblings track across the meadow, and in their wake, as the water drips from the bucket, handed down carefully as they get back down, there, as the water drips into the grass, wildflowers have blossomed, showing a radiant trail as the Prince of the Golden Hand brings back the springtime. And Fabia Girl's more than ready for this. Tries to contain herself to be vaguely polite, but no, grabs that bucket, drinks a little of it, feels things changing inside, cascades the water over herself, and feels youth follow in its wake, a blossoming unlike anything she has ever experienced. Things are now full where they were getting thin. Her hands, she has her hands back. They don't ache. They can, they just do what hands are supposed to do, right? She straightens her back, doesn't make a single sound, and she laughs like she hasn't laughed in centuries. Thank you, she says, and off she goes. We don't know. She's gone off to have her own adventures for once, maybe, or just sleep for a bit. She can do that now. But one of the things I considered at the end of that story is the hero sets off with the various prizes back to the doting parents, and Baba Yaga heads off, youth restored but wisdom retained. What happens to the house when the owner has moved on? So this inspired a poem, and because nobody knew who Baba Yaga was, the introduction gets longer every time. This isn't the longest, but it's one of the longest versions of this introduction I've ever done. And I offered no apologies, but maybe a content warning for dreadful puns. This is uncle level puns, right? Uncle at a wedding pun level. Okay, starting with the title, which goes down better in Scotland or with Scottish people, but anyway, it's called. You remember this cottage has feet, right? It's called Pied à Terre. There's a house by the road where nobody goes. Its shingles are withered and so are its toes. It used to stride freely, its cargo to tote. Now it's stuck by the roadside where nobody goes. It's seen witches and princes and desperate beaux. Now dust lies in court over ragged old throws. How it used to perambulate, no one now knows. It's a lonely old lookout where nobody goes. Little house, turn round to me. Let the sun on your windows the whole world to see. The heroes would seek it now, but peasants would flee. Now it camps out in scrubland and pines for the trees. Its mistress is long gone, which just goes to show that you shouldn't turn round on the word of heroes. Its magic ambitions are covered in mould, and all it can do now is stare at the road. They saw that old house as they northbound flew by, felt its predicament, wanted to cry that its power no concrete could heedlessly bind if it just changed the word it had stored in its mind. Little house, turn round to see. There's nobody stopping me, least of all me. My mistress is gone, and no prince is to flee. Little self, please believe me, I'm perfectly free. There's a patch by the road where nobody goes, with a flattened out square bit and marks of huge toes. One day its old tenant creaked, rocked, groaned, and rose to stride off to a future that you might just know. Cheers. Thanks very much. Oh, I haven't done that one for a while. That was nice. Thank you very much for your indulgence and your time. Hopefully this has warmed you up now. Oh, thanks, Rowan. See, this is the lovely thing about Zoom is that you can just get the things in the chat and join in and let people know how you're feeling about things as you go. So we're going to be very much encouraging you to do that throughout. Thanks very much. Throughout this, to let people know how you're feeling about it, to ask questions if necessary at the right points. But yes, I guess I check with Webster. Are you ready to go?
Yes, if you want to hand over to myself and Fran, we'll do the chat bit
Fantastic.
first.
So I will spotlight you both so that we'll be getting you in conversation. So that's beautiful stuff. So folks, yes, and if you do, if there's time, if you do have extra questions that they have not necessarily answered between them, then get those in the chat so that we can get those answered. I am going to spotlight Webster and then spotlight Fran. That's fantastic. Right, folks? Off you go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. So we'll do some quick introductions first. I am obviously James Webster of Strange Little Stories and this book called Hopefully Ever After. And I'm delighted to introduce you all to Francesca Valentine, soon to be Dr. Valentine. Um, Fran, why don't you tell us what you do?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone. Thank you so much, Faye, for your lovely story and poem. That was funny and beautiful, as you know, all the best stories are. I think. Yeah, so my name is Francesca Valentine, Fran Valentine. I will be a doctor hopefully come January. I currently work for University College London, where I am a lecturer in sustainability. So I teach a master's course on sustainable resources, how we make sure that we have enough of the things that we need for the future. And in my free time, I do quite a lot of LARP. I write LARPs, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about one of the LARPs that I write later. I also paint, and I write stories. So yeah, thanks very much for having me, Webs.
Absolutely delighted. And in case anyone doesn't know, I write and perform. I wrote Hopefully Ever After, which contains 52 stories about hope. And previous to that, I did Monstrous Inc., 52 stories about what it means to be a monster, and Heroine Chic, 52 stories about the role of women in sci-fi and fantasy. And yeah, the first question I have to kind of complete this intro is for each of us. How does hope fit into our work and our creative outputs? Would you like to go first, or shall I?
Why don't you go first?
Lovely. So, in terms of how hope is into the work, so obviously hope fits into this book in hopefully a big way. It was the kind of germination for it actually came from my editor, SJ, who is marvelous, and noticed the pattern that a lot of the stories that I wrote tended to have some element of hope in them, uh, in whatever that means. Certainly, she thought there was enough of it in there to consider that there might be a collection in it. Um, where it comes from for me, I think it's really interesting because one of the reasons I started writing flash fiction stories and sharing them online, which is how the kind of books eventually came into being, is because I just saw that friends who were having what they called their grey days, who were struggling, and I just wanted to do something that would make them smile a little bit. Uh, and that spiraled out of control because I have no chill. And so these things continue. So yeah, the idea of making the world feel brighter and of giving people something that makes them want to go on and find joy in the world is at the heart of a lot of my creative practice. It is in the recent Edinburgh show that I did, which is a kind of choose your own adventure style show. It plays into that a lot as well because I enjoy playing with agency in storytelling, which is why I am such a fan as well of LARP and tabletop games, because they are a fantastic way to practice choice, and it's something we'll get into more later. So I think both like in terms of themes, but also like uh, structurally, I think hope plays a role in my work a lot. I'll pass over to Fran now.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think if you work in the climate sustainability space, as I do, it will be a surprise to no one that there's quite a lot of mental resilience required to work in that space, and you have to face up every day to some quite scary figures and scary realities and projections about what our future might look like, and different people, I think, find different ways of coping with or sort of motivating themselves in that space. And for me, hope is a really important part of that because it's it's the you have to have hope about the future in order to work to save it, I suppose. And so a lot of what I do with my students is finding ways to build their capacity for seeing hopeful futures and for working towards those hopeful futures. In my, and I think that carries over to my I want to say extracurricular, like personal creative projects as well. Because I think that it's very easy in the world that we live in to become discouraged or ground down by the things that we see in the news and the things that we experience in our lives, the hardships and things like that. And so I think that to give people hope, or to give people not as a gift, but to give people the skill of hoping, and teach people the skill of hoping, is one of the most noble things that we can do as humans.
I love the way you put that, of the skill of hoping, a thing that you must learn and practice and do actively. Uh, and also putting the skill makes it really clear is a thing that can be taught as well,
Yeah.
which I think is very powerful there. Um, I've got one follow-up question on that, which is, and then we'll get we'll ask more questions. But I guess my question is, what is the kind of the number one way you think of to teach someone hope? What is how do you
Um,
impart that lesson? Like, what are the
so
headlines?
um I think part of it uh is practice. I think it's one of those things where to hope something really uh, big, which feels very, let's say, unrealistic, to do that as your kind of first hope skill building exercise, that's very hard. That's quite a hard thing to do. And so, maybe you want to work up to that. But I think it's important to practice kind of hope as a skill by doing things like uh, setting yourself hopes for in the kind of short term, or like hopes that you're reasonably sure you can fulfill or enact. And because I think that there's a part of it is about teaching our brains and training our brains that sometimes the things we hope for happen, and like that. I think that makes it easier for us to take ourselves seriously when we hope for things, and therefore be more motivated by our hopes.
Yeah, to create some positive feedback for
Yeah,
yourself
exactly.
to
Exactly. It's the kind of positive feedback.
so that yeah, the and the little things become possible, that feels good, and then you want psychologically, you want to chase more of the good
Yeah.
hopeful things that make you feel good.
Yeah.
um that's really cool and really interesting, and I like that a lot. So let's go on to one of the, I think, big questions of this
Mm.
chat, which is like, what is hope?
Mm.
Because I think hope is a often quite amorphous thing that people say it and they often mean different things. So I think it would be handy for each of us to think of some of the ways, it does not have to be just one, and indeed for me cannot be, ways that we define hope. Uh, yeah. Would, as I went first last time, would you like to
Sure.
begin?
Sure. Yeah, I can go this first this time. So I think that there's two things that I think about when I try and define this idea of hope. And the first is a quote from Rebecca Solnit, who is an excellent kind of nature, politics, and philosophy writer. She's written a bunch of really great things, but one of them is that she has a book called Hope in the Dark: The Untold History of People Power, which is about kind of cultural and social revolutions over time, but she has this great quote from it, which is, hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch feeling lucky. It is an axe you break down doors with and in emergency. And I really love that description of hope as an active verb rather than a kind of passive verb. You're not like sitting around waiting and hoping that things will be different one day. You're taking up hope as a weapon, and saying, I will make things better. This is a tool by which I will make the world better. And this sort of feeds into the other thing that I think of when I was trying to define hope in anticipation of this, which is so in Lord of the Rings, Tolkien has this word in Elvish for hope, which is Estel, which is the Elvish name for Aragorn. And this idea, Estel, he writes about in some of his collected works, where he talks about it as a gift that Eru, the creator, gives us or gives people, sort of representing like, if you imagine it like a star that represents sort of the light, the brightness, the goodness that is possible that we are working towards. It's a kind of guiding thing. And I really like that as a definition of hope as well. Like it's again, it's not a passive thing for us. It's an active thing that we're kind of working towards, looking towards, moving towards.
Yeah, a direction that we move
Yeah,
hopewards.
exactly. Yes, I love that. Hopewards. Let's move hopewards.
I like that as well, in that there's something about like questing in there as well, of that it isn't even necessarily hope we are looking for, but we move in the hopewards direction in the hopes of finding better things there, or things we need there, which is I like a lot. I like as well the metaphor of the fire axe is really cool to me, because there's an implication there that hope is something that is always there with you. It's just you don't always need it.
Yeah.
It is there for you when you have that emergency. Uh, like, and if you don't have it, if you have not prepared by having hope and having it in that little glass case, you will be in trouble. Which again goes a little bit back to hope as a skill and a thing you need to, in this metaphor, sharpen.
So how about you? How would you
Yes.
define it?
So for me, there's lots of descriptions of hope that I like. There's quotes that come to mind of hope is the thing with feathers, or hope is a thing with blood on its face. Don't necessarily fit together well. Like them both good. Like I think I wanted to touch on first is that, especially because it relates to writing really interestingly, is that hope for me often starts in the same place as writing a story starts, in that there is a little internal voice that says, what if things were different? And from that, you decide what you want to do next, which is either to write a story and to imagine a different world in that way, or you look at whatever step is the next one in front of you and go, right, okay, if things could be different, how do I move towards that? And to break that down into little steps. I again, the idea of when you're practicing hope, you might want to start small, I think is really good. I think it often in terms of like the advice that's always given to people with ADHD of, if the task in front of you is too big, break it down into many small tasks. So I think if the world seems intimate and not like something you can change, it's like, oh no, you're not thinking small enough. What is within my power right now? Of course, like the internal voice of what if things were different does differ between writing and like hopeful actions in kind of key ways, because a lot of the time the kind of what if things were different? For writing, it turns into what if things were worse, but in an interesting way.
Yeah.
And that is not always something you want to replicate in your life. Not always. Uh, as well, one definition that has been speaking to me recently that I find hopeful for, I think, like conceptualizing hope is the idea of it as a machine that keeps moving even after the people who operated it or the people who designed it even are not able to anymore. Um, both in terms of it is a thing that will keep you moving when you think you cannot, but also as a almost like a collaborative effort of something that over time various people different people will perform the maintenance. They may change the function of the machine, but it will keep chugging if even if you as an individual do not have the strength to. And there's something there both about community and about persistence
Yeah.
that I like a lot and I find helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I one of the things that I tell my students at the beginning of this year, at the beginning of every year, because obviously they all come into the course, knowing that the state of the climate is very concerning, and wondering whether they can have hope about the future and that things will, whether it's even possible for things to get better. And one of the things I always tell them is that um, the the change we make now is meaningful, and you can, because every kind of, if you want to talk about it in terms of um you know temperature levels or carbon levels, every fraction of a degree lower we are, you can measure that difference in kind of, biodiversity loss that doesn't happen, or human lives that aren't lost, or a number of different ways. And I think that we need to constantly keep in mind that our actions are meaningful, and that worth it is worth working towards, but that's not something that we need to carry out by ourselves, that it's a community movement towards these things, and sort of community projects can be a huge part of that, and like community consciousness, I suppose, is where hope can flourish into action, I suppose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's there are multiple things in there I want to tease out briefly before we ask kind of like the next question on the list, which
Yeah.
is the the idea of like hope by degrees, the almost like fractional nature of hope in that, yeah, it is not something you necessarily have or don't have. There's not a vision of a
Mm.
hopeful future versus a not hopeful
Yeah.
future, but there is a vision of a slightly more hopeful future,
Yeah.
and every degree of that counts,
Yeah.
which is
If
I think
we're
that's a very
moving in a
powerful thing.
hopeward direction, then we will end up in a better place than if we had not moved in that direction.
Yeah. And also, yeah, the shared community aspect of that feels very powerful as well in what is the way to phrase this? I guess it's the many hands make one allow you to pick up a heavier hope,
Mm.
uh,
Yeah.
and also to move it further
Yeah. Yeah. I,
because the idea of trying to be hopeful sometimes does feel, I think, like a heavy thing.
yeah.
And it is not always possible. So knowing that you have backup who will
Yeah.
can nudge that along if you can't is good.
Yeah. When on days when you don't have as much strength to carry the burden, carrying it with other people, and they can take some of the weight for you on that day, is really valuable, I think.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Sorry, Anne McClure, just jumping in here.
Yeah.
In my life,
Well,
sometimes, may I?
we will allow it this once, and other questions we'll do at the end.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No, leave it. I'll come back later.
No,
Thank you. I was just going to say sometimes it's a bit of a baton relay. I think sometimes in my life, I need to have a little bit of hope, and I pass it on to someone else, and they pass it on, and then it comes back to me, and it's stronger.
Yes, 100%. Thank you, Anne. I love the idea there as well of it coming back stronger, because it's a thing of hope. It almost touches on like the idea of hope as a living thing, something that you hand off to someone else, and not only do they carry it for you, they care for it for you, which is gorgeous and important. So the next question on the list, which I think segues neatly from some things we've been talking about, is where do each of us see hope in the world, where and in our lives, and in kind of stories around us. I think it's my turn to go first, so I will. And there are a few things that I did want to touch on there, which is uh, historically for me, the thing that I've always found the most hope in has been specific people, in the people in my life that I find admirable, the people in my life that I think have qualities that I want to see more of in the future, that I want to sometimes want qualities that I want to foster in myself, uh, but or some that I know I cannot comfortably foster myself, but I know are important. So yeah, people of quality is not people of quality. I think as well a element of hope and where I see it and where I find it uh, is in is in faith, like as a person of like a religious person who, albeit of slightly complicated nature, uh, I have some syncretism going on, but in times when I find it hard to know what to hope for, and or hard to know what I can do to move hopewards, it can be helpful for me to think, what does my faith ask of me here? Because especially the faith as I engage with it is a system that I think asks for beneficial things for me that are good for the world. And in a broader sense, what is God asking of me, and what is the world asking of me that I can give? I think that is a place of hope for me, because it is partly because it is relational. I think another thing that more and more I'm finding hope in is both in my life, but also in the stories we tell, is in joy, in kind of the shared joy of the community around me, often in the face of things that are not joyful. And so reclaiming that, as there is a resistance in that, there is a kind of spiteful joy in that, but also in the stories within fiction that find moments for that joy, and especially for the joy of people who often uh, face oppressions, and where it is a very radical act to find that. Um, yeah, there's maybe more I can say, but I think for now I'll pass it over. Fran, for you, where is hope found?
Thank you. I think that I so I two things I want to say here, I suppose. And the first one is that I think that you have to make the conscious effort to look for hope, because it won't always come to you, and you sort of just waiting for it, and you won't. And so I do things like look for hopeful news articles, or look for kind of hopeful or positive scientific discoveries that have happened recently, and I get a lot of hope from kind of intentionally putting myself in situations where not all the information I receive is bad, which I think in with algorithms, it's very easy to end up in a situation where all of the content that you experience is bad. And I think, so consciously looking for positive kind of news stories and scientific discoveries and things like that is important. I see hope. I see hope. I have hope around me, in the form of people who I see working very hard to make the world a better place. And sometimes that's people. I'm privileged to work in a field where I get to see people at work who can draw direct lines between the work that they're doing and making the world a better place. So I get a lot of hope from seeing them do that. But I also get that feeling from friends who are kind of who work very hard in their communities to sort of build hope and build capacity there. So for example, I have some friends who run a food bank, and I get so much hope from spending time with them or finding out about what they're doing. And I have some other friends who work with kids who struggle a lot in school, and I get a lot of hope from seeing and spending time with people who are giving their lives or parts of their lives to make the world better, in sort of very personal ways, which might impact a small number of people to a great extent, or in kind of much more structural ways, which might impact a large number of people to a lesser extent.
Oof, I feel that a lot with the being around people who are dedicating their lives in that way to various hopeful and world improving causes. Uh, I feel like yourself included, I'm very lucky to have a lot of people like that in my life. Although plus I should give some credit to the act of community creation that was. And especially, yes, to touch briefly on something from my day job, which is having worked in things like ticketing and marketing most of my life. It's not somewhere we was often a hopeful thing, although it can be a good thing. But as I'm currently working in marketing for a university and in their kind of environmental and educational school, it means that I do spend a lot of time reading about projects that those cool, excited, intelligent, talented people are doing that like, oh, well, that's all very good. That's all helping.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's a little brighter.
Spend some time focusing being intentional about focusing on projects which are making the world a better place, so that you remind yourself that those things are happening too, and that good things are as possible for us to do as well.
I also think that touched on something like a definition of hope that we didn't talk about a lot, which is hope as a feeling, hope that makes the hope that does sit around with a lottery ticket, but in a slightly more, I guess, active way, in that the lottery win here is that people are already doing the things and that you are not alone. And something in there as well about hope as a habit and internalizing that feeling of hope as a habit, as well as a skill. And part of the skill is building the habit in that way, which is really cool.
That's where your mind goes. you'll find like if building it as a habit, like you can sort of see how that over time would lead your mind to more easily go down those kinds of paths.
Yes. To use the language we've been using so far, which I also very much like, it's creating that hopewards direction internally and mapping out emotionally as well
Yeah.
to make that path more known and more easy. There was one last bit on this that I wanted to touch on where we see hope, which is I think as well in terms of I see hope a little bit as and find it in stubbornness, in survival, in resistance, in those moments when the only thing sometimes that you can say is I am still here and that is enough. Which, in a world that is often kind of not what's the word I'm looking for? That is often like aggressive towards certain peoples and aggressive towards certain feelings, and as it seems sometimes aggressive towards like hope and optimism. To just say I'm still here is very powerful. And I think there's something that occurred to me is that some of that stubbornness is the stubbornness to keep saying the same thing over and over again. And one of my favorite phrases that people say a lot that where I see hope is the people who say, no, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, to echo something you said earlier, in terms of looking for hopeful news, and that it is not as simple as the world is doomed, but that there are plenty of scientific stories that are hopeful about well, a world that will not end. So to allow for complexity, to allow for nuance, and to allow for kind of multiplicity. Yeah, I see lots of hope in that at the moment as well.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything more than agreement and to offer there.
That's right. Sometimes we just agree on a thing, and that's chill.
I do agree on that. Yeah.
Well, the next thing that I definitely wanted to talk about, because we've been talking for a while, and we're probably coming towards the home stretch of this. So let's make sure while we have time that we talk about Age of Hope, which is the game that you run that you created with our dear friend Amy. Would you like to explain to folks what this game is?
So this is a live action role-playing game, which I wrote with our mutual dear friend Amy Russell. And the idea is that you play characters who live in a world at an unspecified point in the future after the apocalypse, and after the world has been destroyed and the world that we know now has been overrun. And it's sort of about healing from trauma, and it's sort of about rebuilding the world. And the reason why we wrote I wrote this game, or the first kind of seeds of this game, I suppose, I wrote in 2019, and then spent a couple of years refining those ideas over the course of 2020 and 2021. But what I really wanted to do was sort of, we were talking earlier about how hope is a skill that you have to practice. What I wanted to do was write a game or a sort of like immersive space where people could start practicing those behaviors and those kind of thought patterns. So start practicing hoping for things, start practicing caring for the people around you, and understanding that caring for your community is magic, and that cooking a meal for someone will heal them, and that singing a song to the community, or writing or telling a story to the community will heal them, and that there are sad and broken and devastated people, places, and things out there, but that it is possible to reclaim some of that, but also to mourn that loss and then move on and rebuild something new and better and beautiful. Yeah, I feel like I could talk about this for a very long time, but Webster, you played this game, so
Yeah, absolutely. Actually,
like
something I'm only realizing now that I think is like baked into the premise of the game, just like thrown to light by the stuff we talked about, is that even right from the jump, just to get your head around playing the game, to buy into the premise of Age of Hope, is to imagine a world where cataclysm happens and the world goes on.
yeah,
Uh, I don't think I'd realized quite how, like, even just trying to comprehend the game and its setting teaches you something about hope to start with,
yeah,
because it makes you imagine the world persisting despite disaster.
yeah. And there was a really important thing that we told people when you make your character for this game. One of the things that is fundamental about every single character there is that the character you play is either your biological descendant or a biological descendant of a person that you love. And the reason why we put that idea into character generation was so that it forced people to, as you say, imagine a world where the world ends and yet we're still here, and
Yeah,
yet
and
things, it is not hopeless.
it makes a very personal thread going forward
Yeah.
through that kind of like uh, twine through the labyrinth style,
Mm.
uh, which is really wonderful. You kind of have to follow that upwards into the story world. Um, and again, like, having played this game, there are really beautiful things about it, kind of like structuring mechanically in terms of just like game design things that are great, and uh, uh, and that tap into how people work in really great ways to get certain benefits, like having your character healed, to get certain or other magical benefits. You have to physically do
Yeah.
hopeful things like
Yeah.
cook or sing, or talk to someone empathetically, or
Yeah. And I
um,
really wanted to, in the game, the things that you have to do, first of all, you have to physically do them. You cannot cast a spell and then it's done. If you want to be healed of your trauma, you have to sit down and tell someone about your trauma, and work through that. And then you will be healed of it. If you are feeling alone and lost, the way that you are healed of that feeling is by participating in community and being cooked for and being held and being loved. And you have to do those things in the game. And hopefully, and what the very gratifying reports that I got back from some people was that when people after the game went back to their real lives and they started feeling, feeling lost and lonely and things like that, one of the responses that was, that they jumped to was, oh, I'm feeling lonely, I should do a community action to heal that, rather than maybe dwelling in that loneliness in a way that they would have before. And obviously, the these are only the seeds. These are still things that we have to practice daily to kind of build those pathways. But yeah, I just wanted to give people a space where they could have that first experience of making those choices, and those choices paying off, and
Yeah,
resulting in healing.
as you were saying earlier, the when you're training hope, you start with things you can achieve,
Yeah.
and capitalize on the what's the dopamine of that to retrain your brain a bit to enhance the scope of what can be achieved. You sent us all to Hope Boot Camp,
Yeah.
and I'm very grateful for this.
Yeah.
I think like even in that game, in the small number of things that are a little more abstract in terms of things that characters can do. And think about like there is a crafting game in Age of Hope where you make potions or items by combining an organic thing, a inorganic thing, and a I guess conceptual thing. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, yeah. I think I labeled it an ephemeral thing,
There
but
we go.
yeah.
Um, But even that, when you're not having, because it's not practical, you cannot go out and physically find each of these things necessarily because they just might not be present in the limitations of the game site. Um, it still connects you in ways to the world around you in that kind of like imaginative and conceptual way, and being like, oh right, so these things of nature and the world are helpful and can be combined in interesting ways, and also one of the elements that makes them work is that ephemeral one, which is often either a beautiful or relational thing, and that these things on their own are not powerful. It is the combination, the fundamental kind of like alchemy of, I would say, like consciousness and uh, relationships, and yes, friendship being magic that makes it work.
Yeah. Yeah. So the the you can put these things of the natural world together, but they won't necessarily have the magical effect that you desire unless you put your desire into them.
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's something great about putting your hope or the thing you want to achieve into a thing and then consuming it, and that's very good. Um, there's also running through the whole chat we've had, I'm reminded of it's an Adrian Lee Brown quote of the writer and activist who was talking about the power of like sci-fi and fantasy stories. And I can't remember the exact words, but the TLDR is it's a way of imagining and practicing the future
Yeah.
because as you were saying, the kind of practice of imagining a world that can be better than this one, which in is put very literally in your game, which I love a lot. Um, but also in miniature scale is put into that little crafting game.
Yeah.
Uh, Interestingly, and I think this leads on to another question I definitely want to touch on before we decide we move on to questions. I think most of the other stuff that was on my list we've already talked about. So here is before we move on to questions. Um, I saw this game, Age of Hope, this wonderful, hopeful game that will teach us many wonderful things. And I saw it and I said to myself, I want to play a character who is all about despair, actually. Um, Literally, the character's name is Despair's Advocate. Um, because I wanted to engage with, well, if in this game where hope and despair are almost very physical things, and some of the forces that will harm you in the world are literally physical manifestations of despair, or people who have lost their hope and become despairing. And I wanted to look at that and be like, well, one, I want to engage with my own mental health through this game because it's a game that in many ways is good for mental health, and so let's get it. Let me get out in the open. But also, I would like to uh, kind of interrogate what despair would can be and what its value is, because I don't think there is any kind of emotional force that is necessarily, outside of maybe very few exceptions, inherently negative. Uh, but clearly, the forces of despair in this world are maladaptive. I think that was an interesting thing too. And this is basically my long segue of let's talk a little bit about the lack of hope and hopelessness.
Mhm.
Uh, and starting with in terms of like what does that look like, both in terms of how you conceptualize it for the game, but also generally like uh what is what does an absence of hope look like?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we were designing the game, we wrote the people and the places which existed without hope as, so they're the significant antagonists, the most significant antagonists that the game kind of has for most of the time. And but one of the things that we were doing when we were writing the people, the individuals who live without hope, who we call the lost in the game, is we characterized them as people who were not capable of pulling themselves out of the hole that they were in. People whose, sadness or anger or greed or whatever else had damaged them or, eroded all of the other parts of them over time, to the point where they had no spark left in them with which they could hope and move hope. And I think that it's a really important one of the stories, one of the questions of Age of Hope, which you heard it here first, people. We're running the finale next year. Is the what do you do about people who have lost all hope? Can they be saved? And if so, how do you save them? And the what the sort of the I guess the story we wanted to explore there is if every one of us is capable of getting into a situation where we are unable to rescue ourselves through no fault of our own. Maybe we have experienced particular circumstances, maybe we get very ill, maybe chemical things can happen in our bodies and brains, which lead us to places where we cannot get ourselves out or we cannot rescue ourselves. And that's where community, I think, is so valuable. And I think that on a personal level, I think that despair is sometimes a very natural, understandable reaction to things that happen to us. It's not necessarily something that we have control over. If we tried to escape from that hole, but it kept dragging us back in, we're not like it takes a lot of strength, and sometimes that is beyond us. And we need the help of others in that scenario. And sorry, I've slightly lost my train of thought there.
That's okay.
But we can be. Oh, yes, that was where I was going. So despair on a kind of personal level is not a fault in us. And and it's not because it can be a rational and appropriate response to what we're experiencing. But I think despair can also present an opportunity as a community to love each other, because I think that people in despair can, in the context of the game, people in despair cannot get themselves out of it and need others to help them. And as a community, it's therefore an opportunity to practice loving and rescuing the people around us who need it, who need us.
So I think that is a very good thing to say for even for outside of the game as well. There is something to say there about how community often is an antidote to hopelessness, and to help you both in material sense, but also to and provide like physical demonstration of how help can happen. And if you cannot create your own task to demonstrate hope, store-bought / community provided is fine. Um, but also to mentally go, okay, you are not capable of imagining a different world currently. That's fine. We can do this for you. And if and when you are ready, we can show you the next step to take for you to move towards that. I think there's something that just briefly to touch on in terms of that kind of despair as often a understandable, almost realistic feeling. Because I think for me, the version of despair that is not disabling and that is not maladaptive is the one that goes, hey, actually, there is a reality of this situation that we need to look at and we need to address, and it's bad. And emotionally allow yourself to acknowledge that and see that when it can often be hard to without that kind of emotional impetus. But then to also acknowledge, partly through that community aspect, that it has its time and that you can let it go when it's not helpful.
I think in the context of, sorry, this is taking me back to just so in the context of like climate and sustainability, it's really important to acknowledge the profound change and loss which exists in the future, and not try and bypass that and ignore it and pretend that it's not there, but face up to it. And and sadness and maybe despair and things like that are a part of coming to terms with those things and other kind of similarly devastating things like that.
100%. It takes me back to what you were saying about despair as an opportunity for love, which is what a sentence to drop on me, Fran. Beautiful.
It's being in despair is an opportunity to be loved.
Yikes. Like there's a level on which I am not ready to process that, and that's if there's any sentence I take away from this talk, it's gonna be that one. Fuck. Fran, how are you doing for time? Do you have time to stick around for some questions?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I think that we will pass it over for maybe 10 minutes or so to people in attendance. If you want to drop any questions in the chat or raise your hand, then me and or Fran can answer any questions you have about what we've talked about Age of Hope, including where you can play it, and about the book, whatever you've got. Either hands up or typey type. Got Faye has a hand up.
and it was on purpose this time.
Hey.
Hey. Yeah, I was wondering how you respond to people who might say something like, oh, but cynicism is a survival tool. It's useful to consider what the worst thing is that might happen, to do the proper risk assessment of that. How would you respond to that if people were getting a bit kind of, oh, all this hopefulness is it's not helpful for survival?
Go ahead, Rose.
I think the first thing I'd say for that is, what are you hoping to achieve by telling me that? Because if what you're saying is a helpful thing, that you think that my level of optimism or hopefulness has actually become unhelpful to me, that could potentially be really helpful feedback. But if what you mean is that this level of optimism or hopefulness makes you uncomfortable and you need to push back against that, then, Uh, and the other thing I'd say is what Jenny has just said in the chat, which is balance of
Hmm.
you're allowed to be a cynical person, and I think a solid community will have hopeful people and cynical people both, who can provide a multiplicity of perspective. Fran.
Um, I would say that uh, imagining only what the bad possible outcomes might be,
Hmm.
I can see why that might make you feel safer, especially if you've had a lot of bad things happen to you in the past.
Hmm.
But I think that if you focus only on the bad things that might happen, you risk blinding yourself to the good things that might happen.
Hmm.
And one of the things that my partner is very fond of telling me when I'm having very anxious or sad days is that good things are as likely to happen as bad things. And if you focus only on the bad things, you might miss the opportunity to have those good things instead. And you almost guarantee that you will only experience bad things if that's the only thing you're looking for.
Yeah,
Okay.
very good point. I think so. The last thing I would say on that is, if someone comes to me and says my cynicism is realistic and your hopefulness is not, it says, is your cynicalness allowing you to and empowering you to act? If so, great, it is helpful to you. Crack on. Um, is By contrast, is my hopefulness becoming, actually, as one of our friend Lucy once said to me, is it becoming just patience with a hat on? If so, then that hopefulness is not serving me, and that's good to be pointed out. Um, but does it lead you to be able to act and take that step forward?
Fantastic. Thank you both.
Any other questions? Let's see if there's any in the. I'm gonna give you all 30 seconds to think of anything else you want to ask. We're counting down. Uh, Actually,
The
Fran,
Age of Hope finale.
do you have any further details about Age of Hope in terms of
Yeah,
when the finale might be?
Amy, my co-game runner, and I are going to see a hopefully game site in December, and assuming that that meets the requirements that we have, and we're going to be booking that. The idea is that to run in August or September next year. And the reason why it's going to be so we initially planned a run of 4 games. We've run 2 so far, and we've decided to combine the last 2 games into one, and run a finale. The reason why we're only running one more is because Amy and my lives have both moved on. We're a lot busier than we used to be. But we didn't want everybody to be left in the lurch with the story, because it's been a very meaningful and powerful experience writing it, and seeing people play it. And the reports, that we get from our players are that they love it as well, which is very gratifying. And we hope that we are going to be able to put before you as players the big questions of the world, some big choices about what kind of world will exist after the events of the game. And you can all decide what sort of future you want to leave behind.
Amazing. As that last sentence, so the kind of future you want to leave behind, that sums up not just that what that event will be about, but a lot of what we have talked about today. As it seems like no further questions are forthcoming, that sounds like a wonderful place to leave this bit of the chat. Thank you so much, Fran. This has been fascinating and illuminating. And yeah, as I said, bits of this, especially that one bit, are gonna come away with me and percolate.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to watch this back and write down some of the things I said today and that you said, and think about them a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, especially despair as an opportunity to be loved. I say again, has invaded my mind like a fast-growing weed.
Oh, and I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you publicly for the poem that you wrote for my wedding, which was about, hope and growing something new. And yeah.
Well, you and Simon together, but with Glenn separately, are some of those people who I find hope in. So it was very easy to write.
That sounds like a great opportunity to maybe hand over to you, perhaps sharing some more of your written words.
Thank you very much. Yes, hello, folks. So on to the last bit of this event, which will be me reading a few things from the book, Hopefully Ever After. I think I'm going to start with, because she has been mentioned in that chat with Fran, a story that I wrote inspired by the dear and wonderful Amy Russell. This is the first story in the collection, and it's called Away from Home. The first time the band of survivors stopped to rest, they were somewhat surprised to see Susie nailing a painting up on the charred wallpaper. Most of the buildings in the village were burnt out wrecks, but they found one that still had walls and most of a roof. It was enough, at least, to allow them to attempt sleep without the fear of being out in the open, and with a thin barrier between them and the oppressive gloom of the ever twilight. Most of the group weren't sure what to make of Susie's efforts. You'd think in dark times like these that everyone would have their eccentricities. But the thing about hard times is they tend to weed out any idiosyncrasies that don't help you survive. One member of the group piped up in a voice more bemused than critical. If we're going to be here for the night, well, for one sleep, you know. Susie just smiled and made sure the painting was hanging straight. She repeated this odd process at every shelter they found along the way, and the group would quickly learn that this was not Susie's only strange habit. For one, her bag was unusually full of assorted luxuries like rugs and ornaments and art supplies rather than the food and weapons that most of the group prized. Even the group's traders and tinkerers found her collection odd, so little of it had any barter value or could make anything practical. Oh, sure, she was good at whittling a wooden stake, as good as anyone, but she could often be found applying her skills to reclaimed furniture. And if elites tried to feed on them, well, then they were glad to have her on side, for she was as fierce as sunlight. But that wild fury was nothing compared to the vibrant, abstract, and violently beautiful paintings that she'd leave on the walls of their shelters. Why does she do this? A small group asked Gerald, the man who had known her longest. Isn't it a bit of a liability? Gerald smiled warmly. Oh, sure, it seemed that way to me at first too. But have you ever noticed? Notice what? We don't get attacked when we rest. Gerald gestured to the broken walls around them. I've been with Susie through a few groups like this, who all did things differently, and one thing's the same between all of them. If Susie is with us, then whatever shelter we choose is safe. You mean, yep, that's her particular kind of magic, Gerald chuckled. She makes a house a home, enough to keep the leeches out. The survivors looked around them. They had to admit the drapes and rug complemented each other beautifully. Susie said nothing as she finished off her latest mural, beautifully illuminated by a homemade lamp. And the half-lit world was a little brighter. So there you go. That is Away from Home, first story in the collection, and one, yeah, I think tells you about who the person who inspired it is, and I think you can probably see how some threads of that story are shared with the game Age of Hope that we talked about. If there is one person I know who is like the localized incarnation of a hearth goddess, it is dear Amy. Okay, we're now going to do a poem, and it's a poem about kind of hope as persistence. Let's find it. This is called By Your Fingernails. When you have fallen so far, you are looking up at the gutter and no longer believe in stars. Cling on by your fingernails. When the world is all edges, intricate gears, sharpening infinitely, when it's too much, too big, too messy, dig your nails into the edifice and squeeze till it becomes a wish. Your fingers are stronger than you think. There is gristle in your palms. Your claws will regrow if you wreck them. Cling, cling, sink them in, cling on. There may be time later to puzzle out how you got to this blank chessboard and play your pawn self back across the void. But for now, gouge a bloody bolt hole and cling. Heed not the tide-washed voice telling you to let go of the one rock that still glistens to you. That is the part of you who listened to the petty tyranny of eyeless cogs that never saw a place for you. It's not their fault they paid attention. But how heartbreaking to know the loudest voices uncurling your hands from their grip are echoed inside yourself. Still, cling on by your fingernails. And when you finally slip on the blood, trust those you clung to will take your hand. There we go. Now, fun fact, I originally wrote that poem because of wrestling, because a while back, some of you know this, started learning how to be a professional wrestler, and in trying to get into like a character headspace, I wrote that poem. I really, really liked it. Uh, there you go. The character has since become less hopeful and more mean than that, but the poem goes on. Um, I didn't talk in the chat I had with Fran about how I do think wrestling is an inherently hopeful kind of medium. That's maybe a like soapbox I'll have to stand on later, but literally in terms of the structure of a professional wrestling match, how you present hope and encourage hope in your audience is literally a big part of that kind of physical storytelling. And I'll leave that there, and we'll do, I think, one more story just to round things out, because I did the first one in the collection. Uh, I did that poem, so let's do the last one in the collection as well. And I lost the page immediately. Hold on, it's still here. This is called Where the Light Gets Out. Zed was standing on the space station's observation deck. The window curved round above and below, making it seem like they floated amid the glittering cosmos. They let their head hang over the railing, watching their tears sparkle like crystals falling through the air to smash on the thick glass beneath. Since Zed had arrived, things had been so busy. So many people there for the collision that they barely had time to breathe, let alone cry. But it was late in the shift cycle, so observation was mostly deserted. As the tears spread, they began to blur out the galaxies in the distance. Zed didn't smile, but it brought them some small satisfaction to think their sadness was strong enough to wash away solar systems. You know there are stars in your tears. Rook had always been a bit of a lurker. Something about them was a little too soft, a little too inwards to be noticed. Are you being poetic again? Zed didn't make any move to wipe away the moisture on their cheeks. There was no hiding from Rook anyway. They had lurked through many of Zed's tears and injuries. They knew all of each other's scars and ugly faces. No, just descriptive. The stars, they're reflected in your tears. They contain suns. Zed huffed and wiped a strand of bright silver hair out of their eyes. It was something akin to watching a polar bear wrinkle its nose, catching a moment where something wild and fierce is suddenly disarmed. No, they extinguished them. It sounded stupid said out loud, but Rook looked down at the tears in the concave window, then Rook looked at Zed and said, "An astrological flood. Moses would be proud." Your Earth history is shit. Moses didn't make the flood. God did, for humanity had grown wicked. Rook looked away a little sadly. They both stared out of the window for a moment. From the right angle, they could see each other reflected in the blurred glass. Zed all ursine hulk and big wide eyes, Rook like a lightning bolt streaked in black velvet. You know, they used to think the binary stars of this system were gods. Rook's voice was quiet as always, but held the threat of an edge beneath the silk. Some still do, I suppose, in a more metaphorical way. Yeah? Yes? Gods that were always chasing each other across the sky. Zed turned. Rook mirrored them without thinking. Zed looked Rook in the eye. Rook's eyes were bloodshot as theirs, but they often were. It didn't always mean tears, it could just mean their implants were acting up. Were they mad at each other? Zed asked quietly, but even Zed's whispers filled rooms. Stories differ. Sometimes they hated each other, other times they were in love, sometimes both. So what does it mean that the two gods are about to crash into each other? Rook smiled and rubbed their nose, adjusting glasses that hadn't been there for years. Fucked if I know. Maybe they finally caught up and will destroy each other. Zed's voice wasn't bitter, not really. It almost sounded like they envied those gods. Maybe it did sound a bit bitter. Or maybe they're finally going to embrace. Rook let the finger of their left hand rest against the little finger of Zed's right. A touch so light it could have been accidental. A question was being asked. And the killer nova? Rook let a little sharpness into their smile. Well, they love each other so fiercely. Zed took Rook's hand in their own. They turned to watch the stars hand in hand. So do you think it will be like watching gods clash? When they collide? Asked Zed. Honestly, Rook let the words roll around their mouth, chewing them over a little. I was thinking about the cracks. These two stars, these twins, old as ever, are about to smash each other into pieces. Rook held up both their hands to gently trace the slow but getting faster spiral orbit of the two nearest stars. So hard the walls of the universe will tremble. The ending of these two things will be so powerful it will make maths shake. They made a kapow sound, miming an explosion using both their hands. But it's not an end, not really. It's an ignition. Rook pointed to the cradle engine, the vast machine that encircled the system in a mess of mile-wide circuits and skyscraper-high hard light proboscis. Its chrome tendrils snaked around the ever-shrinking orbit of the stars. The killer nova, sorry. We're going to use it to kickstart that monster. And that beast will spread its tentacles out through the gaps this impact leaves, through the spaces they shake and the numbers. These stars, these gods, they're going to crack open not just each other, but reality. And we had the audacity to look at these two deities about to end each other and say, we can use that. Have you been to see the demo yet? Have you seen the stellar tunnels? They look like gold. They look like light. They stroked a strand of silver hair behind Zed's ears. They continued. Then, when the dusters have swept up all the gold and platinum, the precious metals these two gods create when they finally kiss, we'll use it to make more circuits, expand the system. The collision of these giants creates the materials for their resurrection. Zed slid an arm around Rook's waist, and the two of them stood there, connected. albeit a tad lopsided thanks to their differing heights. And we'll use that to fill the galaxies with more tunnels, with more light, Rook finished. Zed thought for a moment, then gave a little gasp. We're filling the cracks of the universe with gold, they said. Yes, said Rook. Cohen wasn't quite right, though. Leonard? How so? The cracks aren't where the light gets in. No? Zed reached out with one hand as if to touch the binary stars in front of them. All the light, it's coming from these two. It's the gift that they'll give us. A gift. Rook sometimes had a way of saying words like they were appreciating the flavor. It's not where the light gets in. Zed smiled at Rook. They were both smiling. They were both crying. There were stars in their tears. The crack in everything. That's where the light gets out. And that was where the light gets out. So those are all the stories from Hopefully Ever After I'm going to do. But just quickly, seeing as Fran brought it up, I might do the poem that I wrote for her wedding, if I can find it. Hold on, hold on.
It should be relatively near the top of my Facebook feed if you want to try
Oh, yeah,
that.
that might be easier. Bear with me, folks.
Anyone wants to share some hopeful things in the chat, if you've got some really good news, some fun science stuff that's been happening, or just things that make you go, you know what, humanity's doing well, share it in the chat with us tonight. Not in any way vamping while
Thank you.
Webster is looking for this poem.
I appreciate you. Okay. Oh, here we go. And this is it.
Fantastic.
Because I forgot what I called it. This is called Examples. When the seeds forget how to sprout anything but thorns, and every plant screams neon poison warnings, because they have never seen something grow healthily, then I will give to you a seed. When the books forget how to hold anything but curses, and every act of learning is just a chamber reloaded, because they have never been read with curiosity, then I will give to you a word. When the mushroom forgets how to speak and its long mycelial telegraph wires grow sullen silent because their earth knows only acrimony, then I will give to you a spore. When the stars forget how to burn and every omen is ill, sick with too many spoiled potentials, because no one's ever guided anywhere good, then I will give to you a star. I am cynic struck these days. I have caught a rancid case of wryness, my hope anemic on the scope of the problem, and I know there are few easy fixes. Our path forward must be trod 1,000 times 1,000 feet, walking in approximately the same direction. But, 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 someone must plant the first footsteps in the hungry brambles. Someone must glean from nauseous heavens a heading, and we must all have a reason to step. Today, the two of you, the way you look at each other like sun lamps, like reading lamps, are a very good reason to decide to walk towards a tomorrow. So I give you a seed and it recalls roots. So I give you a word and it gains definition. So I give you a spore and it becomes a network. So I give you a star and it remembers combustion. Today we all watch as you demonstrate. What if? Cool. So that's the last thing I'm going to read. We'll leave it on that note, folks. There's last things to say. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. This has been a delight. Thank you, Faye, for hosting and for telling that beautiful story and poem at the start. That pairing of story and poem make me delighted and happy every time. It turned my kind of nerves at doing this event immediately into enthusiasm. So well done on that alchemy. Uh, Fran, thank you so much. That was everything I wanted that chat to be and more. Thank you for both delighting and surprising me. Um, if you would like, if you do not already own the book, hopefully ever after, you can buy it from Inspired Quill. It's also on Amazon and various other booksellers. The link will go on various places, including I'll put it in the chat shortly. Uh, you can also find out more about the other people who are here. So, Faye, for example, if people want to find more of your work or find out more about you, how could they do that?
I have a website and a link tree and all of that kind of thing, and I will put that in the chat. But basically, it's relatively easy in that it's fayroberts.co.uk is the simplest way to find me. Don't put an extra E in the Fay Roberts, which people will do even when they've clicked on my actual name to send me an email, they add an extra E in for magic or something. So don't do that if you're trying to find me online. But yes, that's the best way to do that.
Lovely. And I believe that Age of Hope has already been linked in the chat, which is good. But Fran, is there anything else you wanted to say or plug or leave us with?
Not particularly. I mean, if you are interested in more of my work or finding out about more of what I do, currently in most places I'm still under the name Francesca Kilpatrick, as I only recently changed my name. But yeah, I think that Age of Hope is the thing that I'd like people to go and check out the most. So yeah, that works great.
I think that if anyone was not aware of it already, judging by what people said in the chats, they are now both aware and significantly enthused. So yeah, let's leave it there. Like you've got the opportunity to, in various ways, come practice hope with us. Do that. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all very much.